UBS is the world's largest wealth management company, a top-tier investment banking and securities firm, and a key global asset manager. In Switzerland, UBS is the market leader in retail and commercial banking. I'm really pleased to welcome Group Head of Infrastructure and Security Engineering and Cloud Strategy for UBS, Paul McGowan. Paul, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Really appreciate your time. Now, being the world's largest wealth management company, there's inherently complexity in what you're doing with UBS and adopting the cloud. I'd love to hear about your journey on this and how you started.
Yeah, so, if we're honest, we started this journey probably 5 years ago. So 5 years ago when I joined UBS, we started what we called the Infra Modernization Program. Yeah, so if you look at, the way, the business has changed over the last 10 years, everything's come more dynamic. So if you're going to become a more dynamic business, you need to have more dynamic infrastructure, more dynamic applications, and a more dynamic way of actually fast fail or fast test, etc., and be able to create those environments. In the legacy environment, we would take 6 to 9 months to provision infrastructure or 6 to 9 months to put new networks in place. In today's business world, that's just not acceptable for what we're trying to achieve.
So clearly innovation was one of the key drivers of the adoption of cloud, but I assume there were other drivers. I'd love to hear about those.
Yeah, so the drivers we look at is the business is becoming more dynamic. So the environments we work in, we have to be able to fast fail any new innovation that we want to do, but also then take the ability of the cloud to help us in some of that innovation. Then we have to look at from a security perspective as well. As you can imagine, being a bank, we're regulated all around the world by various different regulators. So we have to be highly secure, and obviously we have confidential data that we have to manage. As an example, I look after over 3,500 controls that I have to monitor for regulatory reporting. The good thing for us is that Microsoft has taken a step into that environment. So there's a lot of controls that now we don't have to do. We have to report on them, but the controls are actually taken care of for us. And if you look at, from an investment standpoint, Microsoft invests over $1 billion a year in security of the cloud. We could never invest that amount of money. So we're taking advantage of your investments to help us become more secure. But the first step for us was we had to talk to the regulator. So you're talking to FINMA, the FMBY, OCC, PRA. So, I could mention, another 100 regulators. The first step was to work with them, to educate them with what we were going to do. Make sure that they were comfortable with what we were choosing to do, and make sure they were fully informed on all of those things. Once we've done that, then obviously it comes to the internal business conversation. So whether it's with our wealth management, whether it's with our asset management or with our investment bank, talking about the opportunities that will then bring to the bank, where it gives us, the hybrid and the hyperscale, but also the security perspective. And then, the ability to change very fast, which is, once again, I mentioned, was very key to us.
Now, I want to go back for just a second. You mentioned earlier about this internal culture change, and this is something I hear a lot about. It's, the technology, the cloud is important, but also making sure your organization takes advantage of it in the right way and feels comfortable with it. I'd love to hear, obviously, you've done some great work in this area. So what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so the first thing is obviously working with my colleagues in the businesses from a technology side. What we've also done is that, traditionally what will happen is the infrastructure engineering group would engineer everything and say, right now you can use it. So we build a nice ivory tower, then we say, you can come and use our products now. What we did was we said, okay, then for MVP3, there's, say, 8 services that are required. I got my colleagues in the businesses each to develop one of the services. So they felt part of the solution and helping us actually reach the goal of getting to the cloud, rather than feeling like I'm being forced to go somewhere I don't want to go. So they're part of the journey, they're part of the solution. So for me, it's like, the collaboration and the working collective together is one of the most important things you can actually do. Otherwise, it's just seen as another infrastructure program, which it's not. This is the future of the bank.
Absolutely. Now, you talked about the compliance requirements and the auditing and needing to adjust that front. Now, obviously, you must have an enormous compliance requirement, being UBS. How do you manage that ongoing, not just kind of getting the regulators comfortable with cloud, but now as you move forward, what's that look like?
I think the good thing for us is that, first of all, with some of the tools that are available from Microsoft in the cloud are actually very important to allow us to do that. So, if I look at, log analytics, or I look at Azure Event Monitor and how we can use Event Grid, Event Hub, etc. What it's allowed me to do, first of all, is take away some of the monolithic solutions I had in the first place, which actually were very expensive. And then I'm just taking the events that I need. So if I use our SOC as an example, so the Security Operating Center, we will take alerts from Azure. We will feed those through into our user cases we use. We have about 237 user cases. We will feed those through into our SOC. What we've done is cut out the middleman. Before, we had a huge monolithic middleman system, which we no longer need. So it's made us a lot more efficient in the way we're doing it, but also it's an ongoing process. And that's key about, when you do this, is you can't take existing processes and say, right, I'm just going to do them again. What we've done is taken every single control. We have looked is, are they native within Azure? If they are, do they meet our compliance requirements? If yes, tick the box, we move on. If they don't meet them right now, the great thing for us is working with Microsoft, we've been able to get some features made available. So, that's helped us then say, right, now we can move these. And then, we're in ongoing conversations where today we may still have to use some of the on-prem stuff, but we're working with Microsoft again and say, right, we're doing this on-prem today, but what's the chances now we can actually work on this within the Azure stack as well? Because if I require it as a FSI, lots of other people require exactly the same things.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned Azure Stack, which bridges me to a hybrid cloud. And I think you've been very intentional about your hybrid cloud and how you think about it and use it at UBS. So I'd love to hear about your strategy in that area specifically.
Yeah, so for us is, one of our principles is that whatever we design and build in the cloud, we must do exactly the same on-prem. So, if I'm running, Azure, then I run Azure Stack on-prem. Whatever tools I run on top of that must be able to run on or off-prem. So whether the development is on-prem or off-prem, it's exactly the same. And that's really important as well, because if you're making the cultural change, but you say, well, hang on a second, half of you can do it this way and half of you can do it that way, it just doesn't work for us. And then it also gives us a lot more agility, because once again, I can use some of the services, or I can spin up like I would in the cloud on-prem as well. And that's a huge benefit for us. And then, the next thing we're working on, which is, currently under design, is we went all developers to develop in the cloud itself. So rather than having desktops sitting inside the offices or spinning up IaaS so they can develop there, we want them to actually develop in the cloud, because once again, it gets them used to developing in that way.
Got it. So I love that you've moved the development to cloud first and kind of cloud only. What about from a security and kind of management perspective, and using things like Azure Security Center, or Azure Monitor to have that single control plane? What's that look like? Is there able to achieve consistency in that at this point?
Yeah, that's one of the great things as well, is that you can use Azure Center on or off-prem. Now, clearly, when you use it on-prem, you have to obviously manually install the agents, etc. But it means it gives me a single view, a single pane of glass across our estate, and I can use the same processes and techniques to do it. And it's one of the things that we've worked on as well as part of the hybrid cloud and the move to Azure, is that we've created a different operating group. So rather than the typical operations of what we call sysadmins, we're now using developers and engineers who are now their job is to highly automate everything. Their job is to look at code. And this is where some of the analytics we're now getting from Azure really help, because one, it will give you recommendations using the ML tool within in the Azure Event Monitor, but also as well is we can look at some of the alerts or some of the things we're seeing and make them highly automated. And that's the great thing about using Azure Security Center. It's a great thing about doing on and off-prem exactly the same.
Now, as UBS, your requirements are incredibly high, maybe higher than most organizations on the planet. And I was interested in those requirements you looked at and why you chose Azure for your hybrid cloud solution.
Yeah, look, as you can imagine, it was a long conversation because there's more than one cloud provider. But the way we looked at it is that, first of all, we had to have hybrid. So if hybrid didn't exist, that cloud provider couldn't be used. So that obviously takes one of the big providers out of play. We then looked at, if you look at, over 40% of our estate is actually Microsoft. So if you look at it from that perspective as well, that's a large chunk of our estate is a Microsoft estate. The other thing that was key for me is that Microsoft are an enterprise company. So they've been used to dealing with enterprises. I mean, I've worked with Microsoft now for 25 years. That was one of the big key things for us. The other thing as well we looked at is that the work you had done with the regulators prior to people like UBS coming on board, you'd done a lot of the groundwork for us. You had your quarterly meetings with the regulators. You'll come and meet the regulators with us. It just makes the journey so much easier. Otherwise, we're starting from scratch. Starting from scratch means the journey is another 3-4 years. You had done a lot of that pre-work, which was so important to us.
Got it. And I'm so glad to hear that was effective for you. That's certainly the intent on that front. Now, Paul, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your wisdom, your perspective, and taking time to be with us today. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.